Sir, the possibility of successfully navigating an asteroid field is approximately 3,720 to 1.
Never tell me the odds.
This is Tim Lammers, and you're listening to Tim Talks Hollywood. And welcome, everybody, to this free preview of Tim Talks Hollywood, where every week I'll talk movies with fellow critics, chat with guests about what's hot in film and television, and often feature interviews with actors and filmmakers. Episode 1 is now available at patreon.com/Tim Lammers Podcast. Starting with Nancy Nelson, we talked about her late husband Bill Carlson's amazing gift of conversation and how his key to being a great interviewer was about listening. It's something that I learned firsthand when Bill was my mentor at WCCO-TV in Minneapolis.
When you talk about interviewing, I always knew how astonishing he was, but then, of course, both of us traveled with and for those movie companies for, 25, 30 years. And what I would hear all the time is, "Oh, you're Bill's wife. Best interview I've ever had. Nobody ever talked to me better." I mean, name it. Tom Hanks, Denzel Washington, Meryl Streep, Julia Roberts, whoever it was, they all knew who Bill was. They all respected him for his decency, and they all told me he was the best interview they had ever talked to, which is pretty extraordinary for people who talk to thousands of people in their career.
Nancy and I also screened Bohemian Rhapsody together and agree that it's a brilliant movie. It is an incredible film, isn't it, Nancy?
I couldn't agree with you more, Tim. It's absolutely extraordinary and quite a risk for people who decide to make a motion picture about someone as iconic as Freddie Mercury and the musical group Queen, because the fans are legion and there are millions of them across the planet. So they have to put into dramatic context enough of the facts that will not make fans say that's not true. And then, of course, the actor who decides to step up and play this iconic man, Freddie Mercury, is really taking a risk. If he does it right, it could be an enormous career changer. If he does it wrong, fans will never forgive him, and it could tank his career.
I also talked with fellow critic Paul McGuire-Grimes about what he didn't like about Bohemian Rhapsody. Now, with Bohemian Rhapsody, you said the word inspired. Actually, I was the one inspired by this film, but I understand that you are not.
No, I was extremely disappointed by Bohemian Rhapsody across the board. I would say that I really loved Rami Malek's performance as Freddie Mercury, but for someone like Freddie, who is just larger than life, this icon, this rock icon, this gay icon, I feel like this movie did not do him justice at all in any aspect.
And, but the thing is with Rami, I mean, you do feel like you're watching Freddie. Did you feel he channeled him in any sort of way?
Oh, I feel like he definitely captured Rami 100%. And that was one of the things I loved about the movie one of the things I liked about the movie, I should say, is I liked Rami in it. I felt like he was becoming Freddie, but I never felt like the camera or the editing or cinematography trusted that. At times I just wanted to watch Rami perform on stage. But the camera's cutting and the editing is just cutting back and forth so much, whether it's between him, the band, an audience, or it's quickly going to the next scene, that I never felt like I was just grounded, able to watch Rami do his thing and to become Freddie.
Hey, this is Tim Lammers. Thank you all for listening to Tim Talks Hollywood. Also, every week I produce a bonus podcast for Tier 2 subscribers on Patreon.com. It's there I open my interview vault that holds film and TV interviews that I've recorded over the past 25 years. Sometimes the audio is pristine, sometimes the audio sucks, but the conversation is always interesting. This week in theaters is the new fantasy film The Nutcracker in the Four Realms, starring Keira Knightley. So for this week's bonus podcast, I dusted off my conversation that I had with Keira in 2012 for Anna Karenina. Here's a preview.
It can't be an easy role to step into, not only for the fact that, again, you want to separate yourself and give something unique, but it's not the most likable character either, and that's got to make things a little more challenging.
I mean, yeah, it does. In a strange way, she wasn't as terrifying to play as Elizabeth Bennet, because Elizabeth Bennet is somebody, not necessarily because the other people that have played her, but because the novel and the character is somebody that people love and they see themselves as her. You know, Anna is not that. Anna is a very curious creature, a creature that has fascinated, but not somebody that people want to be and not somebody that people necessarily fall in love with. So in that way, it was kind of less daunting.
And that's Deep Purple's classic Space Truckin', the song from the first trailer of Ash vs. Evil Dead, and the last song heard in the series when it came to an end earlier this year after 3 seasons on Starz. I'm going to wrap up this first ever episode of Tim Talks Hollywood today with Ash vs. Evil Dead star Dana DiLorenzo. She quickly became one of my favorite people to interview in the entertainment business after I first talked with her about the show earlier this year. Dana loves to talk, tell stories, and, like her character Kelly Maxwell on Ash vs. Evil Dead, she has no problem whatsoever dropping some serious F-bombs to get her point across. So, listeners with sensitive ears, be warned as we enter this R-rated segment of Tim Talks Hollywood. I had the wonderful opportunity of hosting a Q&A with Dana at Crypticon, Minnesota last weekend. But before we hear highlights from that, let's revisit her classic deli slicer scene from the first season of Ash vs. Evil Dead.
Fuck with me and my friends! Come after my family! Fuck! Yeah!
I think she needed that.
It was her art of swearing where we bonded. I said to Dana in our first interview earlier this year, I said, you belong in the pantheon of the all-time great screen swearers with who?
Samuel motherfucking L. Jackson!
That's right, baby. And
Jack motherfucking
Nicholson.
And it was the best. It was like the greatest. I highlighted it and like printed it out and put it on my fridge at home. I'm from Ohio. And my mom was like, I don't like that you swear. And my dad's like, I think that's a great fucking compliment. I was like, I think so.
And that's a free preview of this week's Tim Talks Hollywood podcast. Please join me for the ride and get the full podcast this week and every week by subscribing to Tim Talks Hollywood at patreon.com/Tim Lammers Podcast.